People often think you'll never make money as a musician. And look, I get it, it's a valid fear. Even my mom was pretty worried at one point when I was younger and urged me to take a traditional path like being a doctor or a lawyer. Well, I sure proved her wrong by being absolutely terrible at everything except for the violin. Super glad I practiced. Thanks, Mom. The good news is that in today's day and age, there are now more ways than ever to make money as a classical trained musician. So if you've already put in all those hours of practice and are still wondering what your future could look like, look no further. I'm here to reassure you with some great ideas that will hopefully inspire you to continue doing the thing that you love and get paid. First one is concert soloist. All right, so the path to being a concert soloist is actually pretty straightforward. However, extremely difficult. It's highly competitive and your chances are never for certain. There are two ways to doing it that I know of, and both are basically to get noticed by the right people. The first way is to win competitions. So you can enter into especially the larger international competitions and win those. You're guaranteed to get a foot in the door to be able to, be noticed, be picked up by record labels, managers, and that sort. The second way, audition for conductors. Now you can ask conductors who might be coming to your school, hey, do you have a moment for me to play for you? Sometimes you should ask the school itself because they might get a little weird about stuff like that and might tell you off. But yeah, that's another way in which you can access conductors. You can also try to find them backstage and just ask them as well. Although always be sure that they're in the right mood. All right, the second way you can make money in 2024 is to be a chamber musician. Now there's two paths to being a chamber musician. One is the professional path. This is kind of your traditional string quartets. Those members usually meet together when they're in a conservatory music school environment. So if you go to a place like Juilliard or Curtis, chances are that you'll meet others who may want to form a quartet. My friends from the Dover Quartet did this when they were students still at Curtis. However, to get into this network, it does require you to take an audition. The second way is to be freelance. You can play wedding gigs, you can play candlelight concerts. There are also cruise ship gigs as well. For those, you do have to be away from your home for 3, sometimes even 6 months at a time though, but you do get to see the world and it's a pretty cool gig. Also recently, Bridgerton style pop string quartets are pretty popular, so that route is also pretty open as of now. The third way to make money is to be an orchestral musician. So the path to this is also pretty straightforward, but highly competitive. You take auditions, and when you win one, you can claim a seat in the orchestra. So depending on which instrument you play, chance could be, more if you're a violinist or less if you're the flute player. That's a pretty interesting position to vie for. I actually studied this because I was thinking of becoming an orchestral musician before I won all my competitions. Yeah, you don't just take one, you take many. You line them up, kind of like lining up your school auditions as well. And of course, there are different types of orchestras. For example, there's the traditional symphonies that you would imagine in a symphony hall. There's pop symphonies as well. There's also musical orchestras, Broadway orchestras, opera. All of them do, however, require you to take an audition. The one thing I found out is that you are allowed legally in the United States at least to take any audition you request. So even if they turn down your application, you can arrive on the day of the audition and they legally have to listen to you. I've spoken to so many musician colleagues who've taken auditions, and the one thing that they all say in common is that I wish I could have another go. And that makes sense, of course. If you have more experience, you'll get better. The thing is, this can be really scary, especially if it's your first time and you're not used to it. Gaining that experience costs so much time and money. So why should you have to pay so much in order just to be able to practice and maybe make mistakes in front of others? So that's where Tonic comes in, and that's what I use it for. By the time your audition, the real one, comes along, you'll be so much more prepared. You open a virtual practice room, people come in, they give feedback, give encouragement. You get to ask them, how do I sound right now? Envision yourself in that environment of being in an audition. That helps so much. So if this sounds interesting to you, you can download it for free with this QR code on the screen or from the link in my description below. All right, so the fourth way in which you can make money is to be on a list. We call this a call musician. The list is owned by a contractor who then calls out to the musician whenever there's a gig, a live performance typically. It could be something at like the Super Bowl if it's really big, or there could be movie night music, even some of the earlier stuff that I talked about, candlelight concerts, weddings and stuff like that. The main thing is you want to be on this list. You want to get to know these contractors, and often unions will have these lists as well. Once you know them, you're safe and solid, and people will continue to call you again and again. I've even heard of musicians being called for performances where they were just literally miming on stage. Number 5 is similar. It's also a different type of call musician. This is a session musician for TV, film, video game scores. This is basically the studio session musician. And similar to the one before of a freelance kind of call musician, you also do have to be a part of a list. It's a different kind of thing, right? You're in the studio, you might be there for 6 to 8 hours, 9 hours even. The other type is like you get to perform, you get to be on stage, but then you're also in front of tons of people. One is more suitable for the performance type. This one is more suitable for those who just don't care about that, can just play well, want to be there. You have to have really great sight reading skills because oftentimes the music, you don't get it before, right? You just have to have it in front of you and you have to be able to read it right there off the bat. Really interesting gig. I've done a few of these myself and they pay really, really well. Number 6, band musician. There are musicians constantly looking for, classically trained types like violinists or pianists. Might want to form a band. Strictly speaking, I think non-classical music. For example, Clean Bandit, there's a violinist in that band. Yellow Card, there's a violinist in there. To be discovered, you kind of have to go to these open mics. You do have to network a bit and you just talk to people. You might even post about it on social media. You could get lucky, but know that this will probably result in playing non-classical music, which, you would have to decide on whether or not you were okay with that. I think it's pretty cool though. Number 7 is teaching positions. Privately, I think that being a Suzuki teacher really helps you naturally get into that network. There are networks like that, or like the Royal College of Music in Toronto, or maybe like the ABRSM in England. Having those types of accreditations really helps, and that's what parents of kids are looking for. And word of mouth, of course, goes a long way, especially if you can have one success story. It doesn't necessarily mean that the student has to go off and win big competitions, right? The success could literally just mean that your student is having a great time. Keep that in mind when you're teaching your students. The other type of teaching is where you teach at a school. And of course, there are different levels of education, right? You could be elementary school teacher, middle school, high school, even at a conservatory or university, right? For those ones at a higher tier, I think the pay is also scaled at that rate, especially if you can bring in students. Students will audition for that particular school just to get into that teacher's studio. Those teachers tend to get paid the most because they have a lot of sway. 8th way in which you can make money is recording your own album. Now, of course, there are the traditional big labels like Universal Music or Sony Music, but these days it's also pretty easy to self-release on streaming platforms like SoundCloud, Apple Music, or Spotify. That's something that you may want to consider, but you may have to gain a following first, which we'll get into later. The 9th way to make money is to be a cover artist. This is where you use your classically trained skills. You hopefully have great technique and you have a great sound. Now let's apply that to music of different genres and see how you do. This is always something that I enjoy trying and testing my skills at. Sure, there might be a stigma against it, but I personally believe that music should be shared with everyone, no matter which genre or which industry. I've made different covers of pop musicians like IU. I've made different covers of video game music, like with the League of Legends stuff that I've done before. It's a lot of fun. Trying out different genres could lead to you being a different type of musician than you once thought you were. Number 10 is being a content creator. There's so many different ways now that you could apply and combine being a content creator with. The main categories of being a content creator are education, so you could be doing the how-to stuff. Comedy as well, kind of like what Two-Set does, the sketches, performance-based kind of content. Outdoors, lately, like that kind of stuff is pretty popular. Busking, Carolina, for example, Pratenko, or the Emilio Piano type, like kind of outdoorsy kind of content is also really popular. And then of course there's long form versus short form as well. Both have their pros and cons, right? Short form, easier to make, it takes less time, gets a wider reach. However, you won't be making, let's say, much money from the videos themselves. I think I've probably made like $23 in my entire life on Instagram. And TikTok these days doesn't pay anything either. However, the upside is that you can use the reach to leverage companies into sponsoring your content. And so that's a pretty cool way to make money as well and still do the thing that you love. And long form is more difficult in terms of creating the content. You have to have a bigger studio, a bigger setup. You might even have to invest in camera cameras or rent cameras, get a producer, all this kind of stuff, the editing costs. However, it will net you more income that can be kind of passive, especially if your videos have legacy and people keep rewatching them. So that's the good thing about long form. The next one is directly related to the previous one that we were talking about of being a content creator, which is advertised or sponsored content. So chances are, if you're doing well as a content creator, you're gonna be approached by companies who want you to market their product. It could be companies that are music related, like music accessory brands or instrument brands, maybe even software, who knows, musical software. But then there are also non-music related companies as well. You could be advertising energy drinks or shoes or cybersecurity, who knows, mobile gaming, and that is a whole world in and of itself. So it's up to you to decide, hey, who do you want to be as a brand? Who do you want to advertise for? Just be aware though that there is such a thing called brand dilution. And the more you advertise for different companies which are unrelated to you, your product, or you as an artist, it will start to get in people's minds that you're just there for the money. So you have to be really careful about that. All right, the last one that we have is merch. Merch, on the other hand, is different from companies trying to advertise. It's you, right? You're producing your own product. There's several ways to approach this. Collaborate with another company, maybe even have them do your fulfillment, or you could produce it yourself and sort of like do your own little startup, little company. It's better to have 10,000 hardcore dedicated followers than, let's say, even 1 million casual ones who may or may not support you or your products when you're pushing them out. When it comes to merch, that's really important. You want your followers, your fan base, your community really, to be supporting you no matter what you put out. And that's where the fun stuff really starts, right? You could be putting out, I don't know, clothing, t-shirts, hoodies, hats, I don't know, sunglasses, keychains. Personally, I put out a few things, and my mentality was always, hey, I really want my fans to be able to come to the concert hall to wear something that they immediately identify with each other. It's kind of like, wow, you're also a Ray fan. But it does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of shipping, fulfillment. You know, you have to product quality control. You learn a lot in the process. So definitely something to think about once you develop your community. All right, so we've covered 12 different ways in which you can make money as a classically trained musician in 2024. Many of these jobs didn't even exist 10 years ago. So now, more than ever, you can be more creative and really carve out your own niche as an individual artist and brand. So I encourage you to try new things, keep growing, definitely stay practicing. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.